Welcome back, everybody. And well, hope you enjoyed the break. And we are now ready for our next discussion, which is all about power generation. So the question we're asking is, where does the sector start to navigate the key elements of the power generation journey? Well, this subject, as many of you know, is very much top of the agenda, with local authorities coming under increasing pressure to deliver on low carbon energy generations and also to reduce emissions through on-site renewable power. So let's talk about solar, hydro, wind, bioenergy and carbon capture and storage, and of course, the challenges and the solutions that each approach brings. Well, to help us do that, we have panel lined up for you. They're all experts in their field, and they are Andrew Hunter, who's the Technical Business Development Manager for Inspired Energy. We also have Danny Mather, who's the Head of Corporate Finance at Warrington Borough Council. We have Alex Oxley, who's the Senior Planning Regeneration Officer at Sandwell Council. And we also have Mark Holmes, Carbon Neutral Cornwall Manager at Cornwall Council. So, gentlemen, welcome to you all. And thank you for being today.
Good morning.
So, good morning. Let's start with you, please, Andrew, if that's possible. We would just like to ask the first question, really, to kick us all off, is what benefits do renewable technologies offer companies given the current difficult energy market?
So, yeah, I'm sure it's fair to say currently with the energy crisis, which probably started before the whole Ukraine, the sorry state of affairs in Ukraine currently with the pandemic, there's been a significant increase in terms of energy costs. So renewables really can help in a number of ways. So they can help an organisation on their journey to net zero in terms of reducing their carbon emissions by looking to offset the amount of energy that they import from the grid by generating with certain varying technologies themselves. And they can range, obviously, dependent if you're looking at domestic applications or commercial applications. So some technologies will have a little bit more of a benefit than others. So it's really about understanding the journey that you're on and the type of property that you want to look to reduce carbon emissions within, and then have a real good feasibility study to kind of have a look at what technologies are suitable, which is quite an important part, really, because not all technologies are going to give the right blend or the right solution. So it's about making sure that technology is applicable, and then that obviously can help to alleviate any future issues with fluctuations in energy prices. So I'm sure everybody's kind of feeling the pinch. Everybody at home and everybody in their commercial or work lives as well are being affected by the energy rate. So it can really help to offset the impact of those rises and really give a good foundation and start to reducing carbon emissions, whether that's for electricity consumption or for heat generation in properties.
No, you're absolutely right, Andrew. I think most of us are feeling that pinch, and you're quite right. It's something we all need to get involved with and indeed embrace. So Mark, let's talk about Cornwall Council then, and why you decided to take the active role in investing in renewable energy, how you did it, and indeed the sort of problems you're coming across.
Yeah, so I think it's something we've been involved with for a number of years. We had the first local authority-owned solar farm, a 5 megawatt solar farm, which supplies part of the Cornwall airport. So, and then about a 10 megawatt portfolio of solar on our council buildings. And we installed our first wind turbine last year in an innovative partnership with Centrica that looks at how we use that wind turbine and turn it on and off depending on the challenge of the grid. So we're really interested in how we can support the established technologies and how that can help the council in terms of not just its ambitions to become carbon neutral, but how we can then use that to support local businesses through our solar framework to use local supply chain and create jobs in the local economy, but also reduce running costs and provide the potential for a return into the council and help to offset other costs that council may face. We're also really keen to support emerging technologies, so we've invested in things like deep geothermal. We co-invested with European funding and private sector financing 2 geothermal projects in Cornwall, and we've looked at an innovative biomethane capture project which will create a potential source of power from farms and create a source of energy for transport and potentially heating in the future. So that we see there's lots of opportunities that Cornwall's natural resources present, and the council has an opportunity to invest in established but support innovative technologies for the wider benefit of Cornwall and the UK energy economy.
So it sounds like you're well ahead with many.
In terms of barriers,
yes.
Yeah, so I think we've made some good progress, but like everyone, we have made some good progress. But like everyone, there are challenges. The grid can become a barrier in that, and those easy win sites have often gone now. So you have to look a bit more at how, best thing for renewables in many cases is large on-site demand. That cost of that building, they're not as many of them around anymore. We've done some of those easy wins, so we need to look at, and that's where the challenge comes, is how you find those suitable sites for the future. But increasing energy prices and the need for energy security is certainly helping to strengthen the case for investment in renewables.
Great, thank you very much. Alex, can you tell us some local examples of good practice projects in Sandwell that could be used as good examples of working towards the green agenda?
Yeah, absolutely, Samina. I'll just start by saying that you introduced us all as experts, and I'm sure the rest of the panel are experts in this subject area. But I am a regeneration planner by trade, so my specialism is technically in town planning and the regeneration focus. But I think the reason that I've been brought into this discussion is because of one of the projects that we've worked on in Sandwell. Which has kind of been held up as good practice. And I think from what Mark was saying, it's possibly at a slightly more localized or smaller scale than some of those sort of huge, really high energy generating projects that Mark's talking about. But it's a good example of how you can incorporate this sort of thinking into all levels of regeneration. And namely, it's a project to do with an outdoor market redevelopment. So our strategic centre of West Bromwich, there is a very vibrant and well-served outdoor market, which, to put it politely, is utilitarian, or was utilitarian in its visual aesthetic. So we decided it needed to be redeveloped for a number of reasons, including a number of ASB issues as well. And when we were looking at different options in which we could deliver something that adds a little bit more value than just replacing the current outdoor market, we came across the concept of introducing photovoltaic PV panels to the ceiling. So essentially, this market redevelopment, instead of just replacing metal sort of clad roofing, we have now introduced a PV solar panel roof. So the outcome of that really is that the market traders have a much more aesthetically pleasing, practical home for them to be able to work from. But in addition to that, the energy generated is going back into the grid. So the contractor anticipates, it's only been operational for about 6 months now, but the contractor anticipates that it will be generating somewhere in the region of 20,000 kilowatt hours, which I think by our estimates equates to around about the energy generated to make 1 cup of tea for each one of our 320,000 residents in Sandwell. So I guess the aspect that we're coming from a regeneration point of view is just about baking power generation and baking green and sustainable credentials into any development scheme that you're looking to bring forward.
Great. We'll come back to you as well about some of the barriers that you actually face as well. But I do want to bring in Daniel at this point, because Daniel, we've heard about quite a few projects, not only in this panel, but in the one previous as well. And there are always barriers to this agenda. What you thought about central government's approach to working with local authorities on what the main weaknesses are there, because we hear a lot about investment or the lack of. We also hear about a skills gap as well. What are you finding are the main weaknesses and certainly the main barriers?
Yeah, I think the main barriers probably working in central government. I think thankfully the government admitted it as well. I'm not quite sure whether you've all read the report. There was a study done by the National Audit Office last year in 2001, largely assessing this situation. I think what the National Audit Office is saying, local government's got a huge part to play as an enabler in this agenda, but it was examining the relationship between local government, and he was very, very critical of government, primarily in many ways. It was basically saying within their recommendations that there's a lack of role and clarity between local government and central government and how the agenda is to work. That there was piecemeal funding as well. I think the way funding works, all the various pots, decarbonisation pots, is absolutely wonderful at the moment, but it does actually favour the very large authorities. If you look at the allocation of that funding, the bulk of it goes to the city regions. The reason why is because they've got, staff of thousands primarily. I make that as a joke, but primarily they have big divisions devoted to climate change. They can put together business cases, but the deadlines for getting these bids in, you usually get a week. So I think primarily the government needs to work with local authorities, whereby some of the small local authorities that perhaps lack the staffing resource to actually put a bid in can actually bid in the future. And I think also primarily what the National Audit Office has said that there was really diffused accountability between local government and government of it was accountable for various skills. I think one of the things you raised as well, again covered in that report, was a lack of skills and capacity, and that's a thing I would stress. We've developed three solar farms over the last few years, and I think even here in Warrington and across local government, there's a massive gap in terms of skills and capacity within the sector, and I think also within the private sector to a degree, because we've actually bought in at times from some of the big four accountancy firms, and at times they're only one page ahead of us in terms of the book. I think that's probably reflective as well of the sort of speed of change as well that's happening in the sector. I think one of the big barriers as well is probably local government as well. Local government doesn't like risk. It is very, very risk averse, and in order to develop solar, wind and other generation, local government's going to have to invest big style in this agenda, and local government doesn't like risk, or if it engages in the agenda, it actually takes them ages from a time point of view. I think probably the other major challenge as well is inflation. I'm not just talking about UK inflation at the moment. There's massive demand for solar panels at the moment. You try and get hold of solar farms, you try and get hold of batteries from China and Korea, and it's actually virtually impossible. And the price is actually the price inflation on these commodities is actually going through the roof by the day. So that primarily can play a major role in determining the viability of business cases as well.
So on that note, and you made me smile when you said about the solar panels, because we've just joined our local council scheme as a bunch of households, probably quite a lot of us who want to get solar panels, and they're doing sort of basically a group deal. So I just wondered in partnership working and how important that is. Because I know you've done something along the municipal community bond, haven't you, in Warrington? So I just wondered how that works and how that benefits everyone.
Yeah, I think what the community municipal bond was a great success. But what community bonds are primarily is where the community invests in a bond with a given rate of interest to actually fund the scheme. They're very, very big in the United States. Apparently, well before my time, they were popular in the 1950s in the UK. But they actually died a death really in the 1960s and 70s. We were building a solar farm where we currently are, should be completed within the next few weeks in Cirencester. Primarily, we wanted to fund some of that through a community bond to give the public of Warrington, but also across the UK, to the opportunity to invest in a social impact asset. I don't know if you know, there's billions, but we've done all the research primarily, and probably individuals like myself and the bulk of you today want to invest the funds really in social impacts. You don't want greenwashed assets. So, but we actually did a big research project, and we decided to run a pilot. So we actually raised £1 million through that public bond offering, and that was in the middle of COVID, really, without any marketing. And it's been an immense success. And a lot of the public are actually donating the interest that they're due actually back to the council, and we are sort of investing that in many sort of green local schemes in terms of peace gardens and planting trees. So we're getting a considerable amount of money, and that was a huge success. But I think in order to implement this agenda for it to be successful over the coming years, partnership working is the critical ingredient.
Great. It sounds fascinating. It's brilliant that it works so well. And I know everybody's listening intently when you were talking about how people are now giving back the benefits from the benefits, using the benefits, I should say, really, of that scheme. So it's maybe something that other people can take away and certainly find out a little bit more about. We've got some questions coming in from the audience. So Mark, I've got one here for you, which says, did you say, this is from Ed, by the way, and it says, did you say you turn on and off your wind turbine? And if so, do you have any storage facilities to store the excess energy produced when you are making too much?
It's a smart grid enabled wind turbine, and there is a battery storage on site, but it was done as part of a European funded project called the Centrica Local Energy Market. So what we also piloted at the time is having local industries. So there's a good example, if you search for the Cornwall Local Energy Market, there's a good video on there of a fishing company who can turn up their ice generator when there's excess wind generation, which means then we don't have to turn it down as much or turn it off as much as we might do. So really the electricity grid is designed for power really coming from big central power stations down to our houses and businesses, and renewables cause a bit of trouble with that in terms of putting renewable energy in from different places at different times. So partly around the pilot was around to see how we could make better local use of the energy generated in Cornwall, to try and mean that we could keep more of the renewables turned on rather than at times having to turn them off and lose that generating.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got another question, which Alex, I'm going to direct at you. It says, have any councils engaged local community energy organisations to install community-backed renewable energy generation for council energy use? Is that something you're aware of?
It's a great question, Serena. It's not something that I'm aware of happening in Sandwell, but it talks to a lot to that point about community that I think that Danny pointed out, and that certainly is one of the things that we've found to be one of the barriers that you need to address, is that what we're effectively asking the community to do is to is a cultural and behavioural change, and it's a modal shift in what we're asking people to do in terms of travel and how they consume energy and deal with waste and such like. So it's not something that I've had any specific involvement with in Sandwell, but it certainly is something that that I think local authorities should be exploring where possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Could
Mark,
I
have
just
you had
add,
any experience of it?
Yeah, so actually we ran a scheme a few years ago called the Community Energy Revolving Loan Fund. So the council made available 2.4 million through a community entity who then loaned that money into community energy projects across Cornwall. And they range from solar on rooftops of businesses through to community-owned wind turbines that were used to power outdoor adventure centres and other assets across. We haven't purchased any of the power directly ourselves as a council, but that is not to say it couldn't happen in the future. Most of those schemes, for example, something on a rugby club where the rugby club would buy the energy from the solar panels, and then that would be used to return a benefit to the community entities and repay the loan to the council. So it was done in a commercial or semi-commercial way, in terms of we had to make sure it met certain criteria for state aid reasons, but the communities were able to benefit directly from power generation. And then later, some of those communities used another form of community finance called community shares, and then they bought back that and repaid the council loan. So then they really localised that benefit even further. So that's something we've done, and actually that loan fund is now fully allocated and has been for a number of years. So we're looking at other options in the future, which could be through a community municipal bond type model or other means of financing.
Yeah, can I just come in? I know Warrington,
yeah,
and
please do.
we've got two community energy companies, and we use the community energy companies from a strategic point of view to sort of do all the small stuff that really takes a long time, but whereby the council should perhaps be concentrating on some of the big stuff. So our community energy companies have been working with schools, putting solar panels on schools, on some care homes, more the community side. But we're also using the profits that the council generates on some of the big stuff. So in effect, we've got to our solar farms, obviously with the price of electricity at the moment, have become very, very profitable and have become cash cows in many ways. And then what we're using each year, the profits of those companies, a proportion of the profit will be invested in the community energy. We'll actually give them a dividend. And when we develop a huge scheme, solar farm, we've done solar farms up to £60 million. We also make the developer make a contribution to community energy as well.
Great. It sounds like it works really well.
If I could just jump up.
Yeah, carry on, Alex, please do.
Sorry, Samina, just whilst we're on the topic of just whilst we're talking sort of things, one of the things that we're looking at in Samwell is, and I can't say that it's directly contributed to a power generation project yet because it's not up and live, but there's certainly no reason why it wouldn't be able to, and the criteria for application would be eligible in that respect, is to look at the use of community crowdfunding. So we are exploring a pilot project based on Crowdfund Plymouth, which is a Silver Jubilee Cup winning project. And essentially, it's the rationale is that the community come to the council with a project that they would like to fund, and providing that the community can raise half of the allocated resources for that, then the council will contribute and top that up to the full 100% ask of the project. So the benefit of that is obviously that the community can bring forward projects that they truly want to see, and that are truly grassroots regeneration and grassroots urbanism led, but they would also provide the opportunity for organisations and community sort of groups to be able to explore the use of that financing avenue for such things as solar panels and some of the things that we're talking about here. So just to sort of flag that as another opportunity or avenue that local authority organisations can potentially employ to sort of push this agenda.
Well, it certainly seems to work, doesn't it? And it's another great example, as you say, of collaboration. And by the way, that was a great question from Cara, so thank you to her, because we certainly got lots of information from our panel from that question. Andrew, at this point with this question, which is coming from Cartagena. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And the question is, as mentioned by the panel, local government finance officers are rather traditional and risk averse. How do I convince my head of finance to consider the available range of green finance options? What would your advice be?
Well, obviously, as we discussed earlier on, the energy market, the way it is at the moment, it does have a huge impact on returns and payback periods for the application of certain technologies. So it's about, I suppose, understanding what you're trying to achieve and working with partners to be able to establish a creditable finance model based on what you're kind of trying to achieve and the technologies that are available, and what you can potentially offset in terms of your current energy costs. And obviously we're talking about decarbonisation, aren't we? So I suppose previously where decarbonisation may have been a kind of want or a need for a lot of organisations, the financial benefits as well can obviously help with the business case to kind of make these push forward. So as I said, it's really about understanding your current situation, how you're procuring your energy currently, and I suppose what impact that has on your finances, and then how these technologies can help alleviate some of that pain and safeguard against future energy rises, etc. So yeah, it's about just kind of having a strategy of kind of what you want to achieve, looking at what technologies are applicable for that strategy, rather than working the other way around and maybe have a, I think as Mark alluded to earlier on, a lot of the quick wins have probably already been looked at. So it's about understanding what you're trying to achieve and working with partners to establish a creditable solution for what you want to do, and then understanding the true financial benefits. So in the current market will speak for themselves.
Yeah, just very quickly, sorry to interrupt you, but is there any restriction to which technologies can be used by companies or for companies?
No, so it's going to be more around what technology is suitable. So,
Right.
For instance, if you look at housing stock, heat pumps might be a technology which will help to offset heat, but with the UK's housing stock being not particularly very energy efficient, it's not going to be the most practical solution, because the housing stock in itself in the majority are not very thermally efficient, so they're going to lose a lot of heat. So it's about understanding what's the right technology to use for the individual application, not necessarily around that some technologies can or can't be used.
Okay.
Is it possible that I can come in quickly there? Because I know what we've done at Warrington actually seems to be working. Climate change in Warrington actually sits in finance. So it's one of the teams I manage, and you might think that's very, very strange, but it is absolutely working fantastically, because primarily in order to take this agenda forward, a vast amount of money is going to have to be spent over the next 10, 20 years. If you look at government figures, in order for the UK to become net zero by 2050, but we're going to have to spend somewhere in the region of 1.4 trillion pounds, and that's a government figure. It's not one of my figures. So there's actually a massive role for finance are going to play in this, in terms of driving the agenda down. And I think at Warrington, we're going at this from a business point of view. Obviously, generation schemes have got to stack up first from a finance point of view, but it is working because finance are engaged from the start, and a lot of people are coming to us, climate change officers saying, we've got great schemes, but as soon as we take them to the 151 officer, the scheme dies immediately, because as you say, finance people tend to be very, very prudent, and we don't like change or risk. But I think primarily you should get finance involved, as soon as you've actually got that idea, instead of building a scheme up, you take it to the 151 officer and then they say no.
Okay, so get them involved
It's interesting
early.
what you say, Danny, as well, because
Carry on, Alex.
Sorry, Samina. It's just interesting what Danny was saying there, because what we're trying to do in Samwell is ensure that finance, when assessing some of our schemes from a regeneration point of view, consider and apply material consideration of those issues and the sort of strategic case for the need for these sorts of interventions. So it's interesting to hear that you're sort of taking that lead from a finance point of view, because I think you're right. That's absolutely where it needs to go, because essentially we all defer to your to your power in that respect.
Well, on that happy and optimistic note, we're going to have to leave it. It is great to hear, though, about the collaboration, and indeed, it's great to hear so many examples of best practice. We hear that term bandied about a lot, don't we, really? But we really have heard great examples today from all of you about how that's being achieved, and we want to thank you for your time today. So Mark, Alex, Daniel and Andrew, thank you very much for being with us today, and long may you continue in the good work. For joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thanks all.
you're welcome. Thank you. And don't forget, if you want to find out more, of course, you can go to the platform, and we'll have we'll certainly have versions of what we've been talking about today available for you to access later on today and going on into the future. Now, though, it is time to have one of our keynote speakers, and coming up next we have Peran Moon, who is the marketing director from Liberty Charge. Now, Peran's got a great speech to give us, and certainly lots to share. He's going to be discussing the electric vehicle evolution over the next 5 years. So, fascinating topic, and lots to hear about and learn. So, Peran, the virtual stage is yours, and welcome.
Thanks very much for that, Samina. As you said, my name is Peran Moon. I'm the marketing director at Liberty Charge, and I am going to try and, as it suggests here, peer into the crystal ball, which is easier said than done when we have so much evolution happening in the electric vehicle market at the moment, and try and give some predictions as to what is coming around the corner over the next 5 years and some of the pressures that we have. But if I could just move on to the next slide. Before I do that, I just want to position the business, the Liberty Charge business. We are a fully funded, full service solution specifically for local authorities, and we are backed by Liberty Global, who are our sister company, Virgin Media O2, we collaborate with for our installations, and Zook. And we have expertise in the delivery of EV charging network infrastructure at scale and at pace right across the UK. And we have installed over 2,000 charge points to date. We specialize in data identification and the optimum locations for electric vehicle charging points. And we have some data that, again, that we've developed with Loughborough University to support that activity. And we deliver safe, accessible and reliable, importantly reliable EV charging infrastructure. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So, about reducing carbon emissions within the UK and the wider world. And this is really what drives the business. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are directly related to our passion, but there are also some big challenges facing the sector and facing both local and national government. And so I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail some of those predictions that I mentioned earlier. So can I have the next slide, please? So as most people will know, the problem lies in the fact that in 2019, our estimates were that 27% of emissions came from the transport sector. Now, we know that this has dropped a little bit during the lockdown, when there was obviously less travel, but they are increasing again now. And so can I have the next slide, please? So we have a significant focus on reducing those emissions. Now, manufacturers and consumers are actually playing their part. So what this slide shows you is the percentage of all new vehicle sales in the UK that were either electric or hybrid vehicles. And as you can see, there's been a significant increase over the last 2 to 3 years. from 11% in 2019 up to 46% last year. And this evolution is simply set to continue. It's not something that's going to slow down. And so I'm going to make my first prediction, if on the next slide, please. And that is that by 2025, in 3 years' time, 90% of all new vehicles that are registered in the UK will either be electric or hybrid. It's pretty likely, pretty certain, based on current estimates, that even this year we'll be pushing 2/3, 60 to 70%. So it's not beyond the greatest imagination to assume that that figure is going to push on to 90%. Now, what's important about that is that is well ahead of government targets to ban petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030 and to ban hybrid vehicles from 2035. Can I have the next slide, please? And as I said here, that there's what we're seeing by 2025 is a much higher percentage of new vehicle sales that will be pure battery from 2025. So the focus from 2025 will switch from the manufacturers and consumers much more into pure electric, because they will be anticipating the fact that hybrid, which will have made up a proportion of that 90%, will be starting to be replaced with pure electric. But, and there's a big but, next slide, please. All of our focus at the moment, 99% of all our focus at the moment, is on new vehicle sales. What we've got to be really careful about is that there are 35 million vehicles on the road at the moment. So even with those huge swings, those huge increases by 2025 of 90% of vehicles being petrol or hybrid vehicles, even by, according to the SMMT, 10 years beyond that, that will make up less than half of all vehicles on the road. So more than half of the vehicles in 10 years' time will still be petrol and diesel unless we do something about it. So can I go on to my next slide, please? So what I'm anticipating, and this is my third prediction, is that national government will come under significant pressure to introduce a scrap to take off-road those older petrol and diesel vehicles. So we focus the attention, switch the attention to those older polluting vehicles at the other end of the market and ensure that they are replaced with lower emission or ideally zero emission vehicles and much more demand on electric vehicles. Now, all of this is kind of a lot of stats and quite scientific, but this has a direct impact on what we do within local authorities and how we focus on electric vehicle infrastructure rollout. Could I have the next slide, please? So unfortunately, with these kind of numbers, doing nothing is not an option. This isn't a transition that's just around the corner. This is here and it's happening now. We're seeing huge demand, huge increases on demand for electric vehicles, and as a consequence of that, electric vehicle charge points, and particularly public charging points. We know that the grant for home charging points has stopped, and there is going to be increasing focus on on-street charging. Could I have the next slide, please? Now, inevitably, because this is a relatively new market, as is completely natural, there will be a degree of fallout. And what I mean by that is that there will be providers, there'll be charge point operators who are acquired, smaller ones who are acquired by bigger ones. And because there is an awful lot of public money sloshing around in the system at the moment, there will be some failures. Because that's a completely natural, normal part of a very new dynamic market. What we do know is that charge point maintenance and downtime are racing up the priority lists for electric vehicle drivers. And so what is critical for local authorities when they're making a decision about which CPOs to work with is to make sure that they're looking at charge point operators that are well backed and well established, because you cannot afford to develop a network with a charge point operator who then potentially has not been around very long, doesn't have the backing and the support when the market becomes more and more competitive, which it is increasingly. Could I have the next slide, please? So the fifth prediction, and this I'm sure will resonate with an awful lot of local authorities, is that we will continue to see transport strategies that are developed that are based on a kind of tiered, prioritized personal travel. So we will be advising local residents, if they can walk, then they should try and walk. That's the most environmentally sound means of travel. If they can't walk, then we're likely to see a big increase in the number of bicycle use, e-bikes and e-scooters. I know there's a lot of debate about e-scooters, but again, this has significant impacts for local authorities in terms of planning, in terms of infrastructure, and in terms of highways. If the bicycle or e-scooter option isn't available, then the next preferred means of travel would ideally be public transport. And we know across the UK we've had significant reductions in support for our public transport networks, but there are some really exciting developments within the e-bus industry, and those are coming through now, and it's likely that we'll see some big changes over the next 2 to 3 years as those e-buses become more and more competitive in the market and start to reach price parity. And then finally, the fourth element is around suggesting that people use their vehicles, but ideally an electric vehicle. Now, I know again that there are challenges around price for an awful lot of people. I'll mention something about that in a second. But Auto Trader are suggesting that we will reach price parity between electric vehicles and petrol and diesel vehicles in the next 2 years. So whilst they're significantly more expensive now, that price difference is shrinking. It is moving away. But the other dynamic that's quite interesting is that we're likely to see a significant increase in uses of car clubs, and particularly initially within urban authorities, but also within rural authorities. The attitude to owning vehicles outright has changed even in the last 10 years dramatically. Only 10% of all new vehicles registered in the UK are actually owned outright. 85 to 90% of consumer vehicles are bought on lease or PCP or some such other. That the natural transition from that is that people will be asking themselves, why do I need to own a depreciating asset? And we're already seeing this, the beginnings of some really significant changes around car clubs. And car clubs are a really exciting development within the automotive industry, because they will allow us to travel where we need to go, but to have a subscription-based access to a private vehicle. And that's where the focus is around electric vehicles, to make sure, again, we're trying to reduce those emissions by ensuring that those car clubs that people need to use when they need to use them are electric vehicles. Could I have the next slide, please? So as I just mentioned there, my sixth prediction is that car clubs offering these subscription-based access to micro-mobility, in other words, people just hiring them for a day or even for just a particular trip, will significantly develop throughout the UK. And this is something that local authorities need to consider in conjunction with their overall electric vehicle strategy. Could I have the next slide, please? So kind of the winners in this world are those people who are going to embrace this change. And we know that there's an awful lot going on at the moment around developing strategies to develop the electric vehicle network. There is one particular issue which is I wanted to raise, and that is around the VAT. So at the moment, there are 11 million homes in the UK that are reliant or would be reliant on on-street parking. Now, on-street parking, on-street charging, I should say, on-street charging attracts 20% VAT. Yet those people that have a drive and therefore have a private charge point at their home only attract a VAT of 5%. So at the moment we're baking in this kind of EV inequality, and that's something that needs to change over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, and we very much hope that it will. So just kind of in summary, there's some massive changes that are happening over the next few years. We're already seeing change at the moment, and I'm conscious of the fact that a lot of local authorities are. This is a very new area for local authorities, and you're juggling a range of different priorities. And electric vehicle infrastructure isn't necessarily absolutely number one, although it is incredibly important. There is some really useful resources that are available to you to support the development of your strategy and the procurement process and the implementation process and the maintenance process. And if I can just point you to one which has been developed by Green TV in conjunction with VPAC, and the URL is evinfrastructurehub.org. That's evinfrastructurehub, all one word, .org. But if you've got any other questions, any other information that you want to part, could I have the next slide, please? I'm really happy for you to drop me a text or a WhatsApp or give me a call or find me on LinkedIn, and we can really answer any of your questions and try and point you in the direction that you need to go. What's absolutely clear is that individual local authorities need to have access to the right level of expertise and support, which not everybody does. So we're available. There are other, I've just mentioned the EV Infrastructure Hub. There are other resources available. Do please use us, ask the questions, and try and find out the information that you need in order to make those informed choices. And in the meantime, I would wish you all safe sailing on your journey to this strange new electric vehicle world. We're here to help you whenever you need to. Back over to you. Thanks, Samira.
Thank you, Perrin. That was fascinating and really interesting to hear your predictions as well, which I have a feeling are going to come true. So thank you very much for sharing that, and also for giving your contact details as well, because I know whilst you were talking, we were actually getting comments coming in already. So I think you are going to be contacted by a few people. So thank you very much, Perrin. Really, really good to hear from you. Well, we've got another break now, and we've got more thought-provoking conversations to come. It is also your opportunity to discover our PSE365 platform. It's our digital marketplace, and of course, the speed networking function on there you probably used in the first break. You can use again, and it hopefully give you a chance to actually meet virtually other people who are obviously with us today as well. So please make use of that. Enjoy the break, and we'll see you for our next session, which is at 11:35. Bye-bye for now.